Welcome to the deep dive. Today we're going to be exploring a world that I think most of us only kind of get to glimpse from the safety of, solid ground. We're talking about base jumping.
And we're going deeper than just the jumps themselves.
Okay.
We're going to be diving into the minds of these athletes using the documentary A Base Jumper's Mind as our guide.
Okay, cool.
You'll meet 6 incredible individuals, each with their own unique story to tell.
6. Wow, okay. So this is not just about crazy stunts then. We're really going to get to understand the people behind the parachutes.
Exactly. We'll meet Vincent Descols, McDougall, Gerdes, Justine Edde, Fabian Equey, and Zak Tessier.
Wow, that's a lot of names.
But before we get to know them, let's make sure we're all on the same page. What exactly is base jumping?
Yeah, good point. I mean, I know it's basically jumping off of things with the parachute.
Yeah.
But there's got to be more to it than that, right?
Definitely more to it. The acronym itself, buildings, antennas, spans, and earth, hints at the variety.
Oh.
Essentially, it's parachuting from fixed structures, not planes.
Right.
And that's where the more to it comes in.
So less time to deploy the parachute. Yikes. That sounds way more intense than just regular skydiving.
Exactly. That limited altitude means a much higher risk factor, making it one of the most dangerous extreme sports out there.
Oh, wow. Okay, so high risk, incredible skill, but why do they do it? I mean, the documentary must shed some light on that.
It does, and it's fascinating. You see, base jumping taps into this primal human desire, this urge to fly.
Oh, okay.
It's about experiencing a level of freedom that, most of us can only dream of. Think about it.
Yeah.
You're not just falling. You're choosing to fall.
Yeah. Wow. It's like taking control of something that usually controls us, right? Gravity.
That control, that choice, is a huge part of the appeal. And the documentary captures this beautifully, showing the pure euphoria these jumpers experience. It's about feeling totally present, alive in the moment, connected to something bigger than themselves.
Yeah, I'm starting to get it. It's not just about the adrenaline rush. It's about something deeper, something more.
Absolutely. The documentary actually focuses a lot on Vincent Descols, a guy whose passion for flight goes way beyond base jumping.
Oh, tell me more about him. What makes him so special?
Well, he's not just a base jumper. He's also a pilot, a speed rider, a true all-around adventurer.
Wow.
And what's really interesting is how his meticulous planning and visualization skills carry over from one pursuit to another.
So even in something as seemingly wild as base jumping, there's a lot of careful thought and preparation.
Definitely. And that's something that comes through loud and clear with Descols.
Yeah.
The documentary shares this incredible story from his childhood where he talks about dreaming of running and jumping off cliffs long before he even knew base jumping was a thing.
Really? That's wild. So this innate desire to fly, to defy gravity, was always there, just waiting for the right outlet.
Exactly. And in a way, that speaks to the heart of base jumping. It's about pushing boundaries, both personal and physical. Wow. It's about conquering fears and experiencing something truly extraordinary.
It sounds exhilarating and terrifying all at the same time.
Yeah.
But I guess that's part of the allure, right?
Definitely. And the documentary doesn't shy away from the risks involved either. In fact, it includes a pretty powerful story about a fatal base jumping accident.
Oh, wow.
Forcing viewers to confront the very real dangers of this sport.
Oh, okay. So they don't sugarcoat it at all. That must be tough to watch. But also important, I guess, to see the reality of what these jumpers face.
It is. And it's interesting because the jumpers themselves are incredibly aware of these risks. They talk about meticulous planning, training, and risk assessment as being absolutely essential. There's this quote from one of the jumpers, McDougall, that really stuck with me. He said, "If I didn't have fear, I'd be dead because I'd be doing stupid things."
So fear is actually a good thing in this context. It keeps them safe.
Exactly. They respect fear, but they also learn how to manage it. They know their limits, and they don't let the thrill override good judgment.
Okay, that makes sense. It's not about being reckless. It's about calculated risk.
Right.
But speaking of thrills, we can't talk about base jumping without mentioning wingsuit base jump.
Oh, yeah.
It's like the next level of crazy, right?
Absolutely. Wingsuit base jumping has exploded in popularity, and it's easy to see why. It takes that dream of human flight to a whole other level, and it's visually spectacular.
But I imagine it's even more dangerous than regular base jumping.
For sure. It requires a whole different level of skill and experience.
Right.
Gerdes, one of the wingsuit base jumpers in the documentary, really emphasizes that.
Okay.
He actually advises aspiring wingsuit base jumpers to gain a lot of experience skydiving first.
Yeah, that makes sense. You want to be pretty comfortable with a parachute before you're like hurtling towards the earth in a wingsuit.
Exactly. And you know what's really cool? Gerdes is super passionate about making wingsuit design and development more focused on safety and accessibility.
Oh, okay.
He wants suits that are comfortable, easy to use, and reliable for parachute deployment.
So he's thinking about the bigger picture, how to evolve the sport and make it safer for everyone.
That's right. And this is where the documentary starts to reveal some intriguing cultural differences within the base jumping community. Zak Tessier, an American base jumper, contrasts the scene in the U.S. with Europe.
Oh, that's interesting. I'm curious. What are the differences?
Well, Tessier observes that in Europe, there's a greater emphasis on legality and daylight base jumping.
Okay.
It's about prioritizing visual awareness and safety.
Which makes sense, right? You can see where you're going, assess the conditions better.
Exactly. But in the U.S., Tessier says it's more common to jump at night, like ninjas.
Oh, wow.
Even from objects that are, considered off limits. It's a different approach to risk-taking and legality.
That's so interesting. So even within this niche community, there are these different philosophies and approaches. It's not as monolithic as you might think.
Right. And it highlights just how complex and multifaceted the world of base jumping really is. But I think we should pause here for now. There's a lot more to unpack, so we'll pick this up in the next part of our deep dive.
All right, we're back, ready to dive even deeper into this world of base jumping. We've talked about the allure, the risks, even some cultural differences, but I'm curious about the actual process of base jumping. Like, what kind of skills and techniques are we even talking about here?
Well, it might look like these jumpers are just leaping off cliffs with, reckless abandon. But there's actually a tremendous amount of skill, precision, and planning involved.
It's not as simple as see cliff, jump off cliff then.
Definitely not. Remember Vincent Descols, the pilot we talked about earlier? Well, the documentary shows him meticulously planning his jumps, even using visualization techniques to prepare.
Wait, hold on. He's visualizing these jumps beforehand, like mentally rehearsing them.
Right. That's right. And it's a common practice among base jumpers. They carefully study the terrain, wind conditions, and even use tools like lasers to calculate distances and trajectories.
Wow, so it's almost like they're turning these cliffs into a giant three-dimensional chessboard.
Yeah.
Figuring out every possible move and outcome.
That's a great analogy. They have to factor in variables like the height of the cliff, the proximity of obstacles like trees or rocks, and the speed at which they'll be falling. And then, of course, there's the parachute deployment.
Right, which seems way more intense with base jumping than with regular skydiving because they have so much less time to get it right.
Exactly. They rely on highly specialized parachutes that are designed for rapid deployment and maneuverability. And speaking of getting things right, the documentary also highlights the importance of a stable exit.
A stable exit. So how they actually leave the cliff?
Exactly. Matt Gerdes, one of the jumpers, really emphasizes this point. If you don't exit cleanly, you're already setting yourself up for potential problems. A bad exit can lead to instability in the air and increase the risk of colliding with the cliff face.
That makes a lot of sense. It's like the foundation of the entire jump. But I'm curious, how do these base jumpers even find suitable locations? I mean, it's not like they can just pick any random cliff, right?
Well, that's where things get even more interesting. You remember how we talked about Descols being a pilot?
Yeah.
Well, the documentary shows him using a plane to scout potential jump sites.
He's scouting from a plane. I'd be terrified just being up there, let alone thinking about jumping out. But I guess that speaks to the level of meticulous planning these jumpers undertake. It's not just about the thrill, it's calculated.
You got it. That aerial perspective allows Descols to assess the feasibility and safety of a jump before ever setting foot on the cliff. He can identify potential hazards, analyze wind patterns, and even map out his flight path in advance.
That's incredible. It's like taking that chessboard analogy to a whole new level. They're not just playing the game, they're designing the board itself. But we've talked a lot about the physical and technical aspects of base jumping. I'm really curious to hear more about the emotional and psychological side of things. What does the documentary reveal about that?
That's where a base jumper's mind truly shines, I think. It gives us a glimpse into the inner world of these jumpers, their motivations, their fears, and that profound sense of satisfaction they get from this sport.
Okay, so walk me through it. What are they feeling? What are they thinking?
Well, for starters, they describe this incredible feeling of freedom. There's a quote from Descols that I think really captures it. The very first jump I did, there was the kind of mystic thing about base jumping.
Mystic. That's an interesting word choice. What do you think he means by that?
I think he's getting at the fact that there's something almost spiritual about the experience. It's about pushing your own limits, conquering fears, and experiencing a profound connection with nature, with something much bigger than yourself.
And, we often hear about the adrenaline rush being a big part of extreme sports, but it sounds like with base jumping, it goes way beyond just that initial adrenaline spike.
Absolutely. The documentary captures moments of quiet reflection where these jumpers seem almost meditative in their appreciation for the landscapes they're jumping into.
So there's a sense of awe and wonder mixed in with all the adrenaline and risk. That's pretty amazing.
It is. And it's not just about the individual jumps either. The documentary really emphasizes the importance of community within base jumping.
Okay.
They talk about the camaraderie, the shared passion, the friendships forged in the face of danger.
Yeah, that makes sense. I mean, facing these kinds of risks together must create a pretty powerful bond.
Exactly. Chris McDougall describes it as a subculture of positivity and resilience. These jumpers have a unique outlook on life, one that embraces risk, celebrates the present moment, and values the connections they have with each other.
Wow. It sounds like base jumping isn't just a sport, it's almost a way of life, a philosophy.
I think you're right. And despite the inherent dangers, these jumpers have this incredible zest for life. They've seen accidents, they've lost friends, but they continue to jump because the rewards for them are just too great to ignore.
It's inspiring in a way. They're challenging our perceptions of what's possible, reminding us that there are still frontiers to explore, both within ourselves and in the world around us.
I completely agree. And while base jumping might not be for everyone, I think there are valuable lessons we can all take away from their mindset and approach to life.
For sure. We could all benefit from embracing challenges, pushing our own boundaries, and finding ways to reconnect with that sense of wonder and adventure that often gets lost in the daily grind.
Couldn't have said it better myself. But I think it's time to shift gears a bit. We've explored the allure, the personal journeys, but there's another side to base jumping that we need to address.
You mean the controversies?
Yeah.
Okay, I'm ready to hear more about that.
Great. Let's delve into that now.
Okay, so we're back, and I have to admit, this whole deep dive into base jumping has been a real eye-opener. It's so much more complex and nuanced than I ever imagined.
Yeah, for sure. It's been pretty fascinating, right? To peel back the layers and really explore the motivations, the skills, the whole emotional landscape of this extreme sport.
Absolutely. But now I think it's time to address the elephant in the room, the controversies surrounding base jumping. We've touched on some of the risks and cultural differences, but what are the bigger kind of ethical considerations here?
That's a great question, and it's something the documentary doesn't shy away from. Zak Tessier, who we talked about earlier, actually speaks directly to this tension that exists between base jumpers and authorities, particularly in the United States.
Yeah, right. He mentioned the differing views on legality and safety between the U.S. and Europe.
Exactly. And in the documentary, Tessier points out that a lot of base jumpers see the regulations as, illogical and restrictive. They view themselves as adventurers, exploring these natural landscapes, not criminals.
I can see their point, but I also understand the concerns about safety, especially when jumps are happening near populated areas.
Oh, absolutely. It's a balancing act, for sure. Base jumping, by its very nature, carries a certain level of risk, not only for the jumpers themselves, but also potentially for bystanders or even property. And then there are the concerns about, rescue efforts when things go wrong.
Right. So it becomes a question of individual freedom versus public safety.
Precisely. And it's a conversation that's happening within the base jumping community itself. There's a growing awareness, I think, of the need for self-regulation and responsible practices.
So they're not just ignoring these concerns, they're actively trying to find solutions.
Definitely. Matt Gerdes, the wingsuit designer, is a great example of this. He emphasizes the importance of sharing information about jump sites, weather conditions, safety protocols, learning from past accidents.
Okay.
He believes that through better equipment, better training, and a culture of risk management, base jumping can become safer.
Yeah. It sounds like they're striving for a kind of sustainable approach to the sport, one that minimizes the inherent dangers without, stifling that spirit of adventure that draws people to base jumping in the first place.
That's a great way to put it. It's about finding that delicate balance, right, between pushing boundaries and respecting the very real risks involved.
Yeah.
And, throughout this whole deep dive, there's this one thought that keeps coming back to me. The mountains will always be there.
That's a powerful image. What does that mean to you in the context of this conversation?
I think it's a reminder that nature exists on its own terms. regardless of our desires or, our risk tolerance. We can't control the mountains, the wind, the elements.
Right. So it's about approaching these environments with humility and respect.
Exactly. And recognizing that our choices, whether we're base jumpers or not, have consequences. We need to be mindful of the impact our actions have, on ourselves and the world around us.
That's a great takeaway. And I think it perfectly encapsulates what we've been exploring in this whole deep dive. It's not just about base jumping. It's about understanding risk, pursuing passions, and finding our own balance in a world full of, wonder and challenges.
Beautifully said. And while base jumping might not be for everyone, there's something undeniably inspiring about these individuals. They push boundaries, embrace risk, and they find such profound meaning in their pursuit of flight.
Absolutely. Their stories remind us that there are still frontiers to explore, both within ourselves and in the world around us.
So as we wrap up this deep dive into the world of base jumping, I just want to encourage you to keep exploring, keep learning, and maybe even push your own boundaries. But to do so with awareness, respect for yourself, and a deep appreciation for this incredible world we inhabit.
That's a great note to end on. Thanks for joining us on this journey into the minds of base jumpers. Until next time, keep exploring.